The movie opens in Japanese-occupied Korea with Sookee parting ways from her family as Kutan weeps at the fact that it isn't her going off to the Jap's house, but instead to work as a maid to the heiress. Sookee passes out in the car during the long journey and is suddenly woken up when the driver honks the horn to have the gate open. When she wakes up, the driver comments that she should go back to sleep as it's still a long way to the house. Hinting at just how vast the estate is, when Sookee finally arrives, she's greeted by an older woman. The older woman tells her the property has 3 buildings, a Western-style wing designed by an English architect, and a Japanese-style wing, stating that the master of the estate combined the 2 styles to show his admiration for the 2 great nations. While passing through the buildings, the old lady shows her the servants' quarters but states that Sookee won't be sleeping there as she's hired to be Lady Hideko's handmaiden. The old lady tells Sookee that she's allowed to eat the leftovers of Lady Hideko but warns her not to touch the tea or the use soap, as they are promised to the steward and the kitchen girls. The old lady then refers to Sookee as Tamako, stating that it's the Japanese version of her name. When they finally reach the living room, the old lady reveals that her name is Sasaki. As they make their way upstairs to Sookee's room, Sasaki states the love their master has for books. She tells Sookee, who she now refers to as Tamako, of the importance of their master and the connection he has to the colonial government, which lets them use electricity in a house even though there are regular blackouts. Sasaki finally shows Tamako her living quarters and warns that Lady Hideko is a light sleeper due to her nerves, shushing Tamako when she asks questions. Tamako wakes up to the lady's screams and quickly rushes into the bedroom to check on her. When she makes her way to the bed, she realizes Lady Hideko's only having a nightmare and tries to calm her down. But the lady points to a cherry tree outside the window and insists that she sees the ghost of her aunt who hanged herself on that very tree years ago after going mad. Tamako gives Lady Hideko a spoonful of sake and sings to her to calm her down. In a flashback, Tamako reveals that she's not really a poor Korean handmaiden, but a pickpocket raised by the notorious Miss Boksuon. In the flashback, while recounting the living situation of her made-up family, we learn from Count Fujiwara, a man hired by Lady Hideko's uncle Kozuki, to counterfeit rare books, the story of how the lady's uncle became her uncle in the first place after bribing his way into being a translator for the Japanese government and helping them take over Korea in return for a gold mine. It's further revealed that Kozuki then married the daughter of a fallen Japanese noble to take the name he claims now, Kozuki. Count Fujiwara then tells the family his plan of marrying Kozuki's niece, Lady Hideko, and declaring her insane in an attempt to take her family's inheritance. He then tells them that Kozuki also plans to marry Hideko as he's now just a guardian to the family fortune he's also after. After finishing with the backstory, he tells the family he'll share a small piece of the fortune with Tamako in return for helping him with his scheme. Tamako renegotiates her share and agrees to do it. In the present, Sasaki formally introduces Tamako to Lady Hideko. Tamako notes the beauty of the lady as she gasps in awe the first time she sees her in daylight. The lady orders Tamako to read a reference letter forged by Count Fujiwara. Tamako attempts to recount what Fujiwara told her he put in the letter, but finally admits that she can't read when she fails to remember everything he said. Lady Hideko's surprised and tells Tamako that reading can be learned but to never lie to her again. The lady then shows Tamako a photo of her deceased mother and comments how everyone says she can't possibly compare to her mother's beauty. Tamako, however, lies and tells her how Count Fujiwara told her how often he drifts away thinking of the lady's great beauty. The lie manages to make the lady smile. At noon, Tamako runs in the rain across the vast estate to the reading room. When she opens the door, she sees Tamako with Kazuki sitting across a reading table. She then tries to cross Kazuki, warns her of the snake in front of the door, which is supposed to mark the bond of knowledge. Later, Tamako prepares a bath for the lady, telling her that the Count would come to visit that day. While taking the bath, the lady complains that one of her teeth keeps cutting her. Tamako tells the lady not to worry and manages to file the lady's teeth. The close proximity to the lady drew her in and the moment became increasingly intimate. Moments later, Count Fujiwara arrives at the house and is greeted by Lady Hideko. After greeting the lady, the Count notices Tamako in the room and warns her to carry out her duties perfectly, as it'll reflect badly on him if she doesn't. Later, one of the servants knocks at Lady Hideko's room requesting that Tamako run an errand for the Count. After the lady gives permission, Tamako heads to the guest room to see Count Fujiwara. After making sure they're alone in the room, the Count tells Tamako to arrange for him and the lady to be alone when he gives the signal. But Tamako notes the naivete of the lady, noting that she wouldn't know what to do with a man. The Count then reminds her that's exactly why she was hired, to push the lady towards him by any means necessary. He then gives her a gift to give to the lady, an earring that looks to be made out of blue sapphire. When the lady rhetorically asks if Tamako's ever seen sapphire so blue, Tamako examines the gem and notes that it's in fact a blue spinel, not a blue sapphire. When her confidence woman background slips up, Tamako quickly recovers, saying that it was her previous lady that taught her about gems. As the lady walks to the dining room, Tamako follows close behind, admiring the beauty of the lady, adorned in her jewels and beautiful dress. After dinner, the lady and Tamako go to her bedroom, where Lady Hideko has her wear one of her beautiful dresses. The lady notes how ladylike Tamako also looks with one of her dresses on. While undressing the lady, Tamako asks if she's going to actually marry her uncle Kazuki. The lady with a sullen face notes that that's what he raised her for, to marry her for her fortune. Later, during a painting session, the Count gives Tamako the signal to have the lady alone with him and leaves the room. While walking in the garden, Lady Hideko asks how Tamako's mother died and learns that Tamako's mother hanged herself much like the lady's aunt. Lady Hideko tells Tamako with sadness in her eyes that her mother died giving birth to her, saying it's as if she hanged her mother herself. Teary-eyed, Tamako cups the lady's face and assures her no baby is guilty of being born. In a flashback, we see Tamako ask her adoptive mother, Miss Boksuon, if her mother cried when she was hanged, and Boksuon replies that her mother stole thousands of times and died only once, adding that she felt lucky to have Tamako before she died. After the conversation, Tamako tells the Lady Hideko that she's going to make her mushroom soup that night and leaves under the pretense so the Count can have alone time with the lady. The next few days as the Count makes his move, Tamako regrets what she had done, feeling guilty because of the connection they made. One day as the Count and lady walk through the woods with Tamako carrying the painting equipment, the Count orders Tamako to go back to the house and get the oil paintings. When Tamako returns, she sees Lady Hideko and Count Fujiwara kissing. Later that night, Lady Hideko calls Tamako to bed, saying she feels like she's going to have a nightmare tonight. She then tells Tamako that the Count had proposed to her, saying he plans to elope when her uncle visits his mine. Tamako asks the lady what she said and learns the Lady Hideko hadn't agreed yet because she's scared. After hearing the lady's confession about not knowing what to do once she's married, Tamako decides to show Lady Hideko how to kiss, and the two spend the night together. The next day during their painting session, the Count attempts to make his intentions even clearer by constantly touching and caressing the lady. Lady Hideko feels uncomfortable by how forward the Count was and yells for him to stop. The Count then tells Tamako to leave the room, but she refuses, saying that her duty is to stay by the lady's side. Frustrated, Count Fujiwara goes out and has an argument with Tamako, yelling that this was his last chance to change his life. After telling the Count to calm down and not be too forward with the lady, Tamako storms off. Later that night, while tending to the lady, Tamako attempts to convince her to marry Count Fujiwara, insisting that she loves him even though the lady tells her that she loves another. Lady Hideko gets angry at the fact that Tamako is insisting she marries the Count without giving a care to what she's saying and slaps Tamako, violently dragging her out of the house. In the end, Hideko accepted the Count's proposal on the condition that Tamako comes along to Japan with her. After traveling to Japan, the couple are married with Tamako as the witness. Later, the Count keeps his promise and brings Tamako's share of the money in a duffel bag. A few days after, the two conspire as planned and have the lady taken to the asylum. But when they reach the hospital, Count Fujiwara and the lady label Tamako as being the one that's mad with the lady assuming Tamako's identity. Tamako pleads with Count Fujiwara that she's dragged into the hospital, yelling that she's not the Countess, but a lowly Korean maid. In a flashback, when Lady Hideko was a little girl, we see Kazuki physically and psychologically abuse both her and her aunt. Lady Hideko's aunt had the role of the reader in Kazuki's library, and Lady was being trained to take over. Kazuki regularly warns Lady Hideko that he'll take her to a mental hospital if she's not cooperative, insisting that mental illness runs in the mother side of the family. Kazuki tells the young lady that he's training so she won't be sent to the mental hospital, but the training, as he calls it, was sick and sadistic pornography. He was forcing both her aunt and her to read for a group of old Japanese men. Eventually, the abuse and psychological torment becomes too much and her aunt hangs herself. In the more recent past, in one of Lady Hideko's readings, she notices a new face in the group, Count Fujiwara. Kazuki uses Lady Hideko to satisfy the perverse needs of his guests. He asks the Count what he'd be willing to spend 10 minutes with the lady, to which he admits that he's willing to give anything. Later, after the reading session is over, Kazuki discovers the talent Count Fujiwara has for forgery and invites him for dinner, where he first meets the lady. Later that night, Count Fujiwara sneaks to the bedroom of Lady Hideko and confesses that he isn't even a Japanese count, but actually a Korean farmhand that trained for 15 years in Japan in bookmaking and forgery so he could meet her and steal her inheritance. The Count then admits as soon as he saw Lady Hideko, he knew he wouldn't be able to seduce her out of her fortune and proposes a deal. The proposal is they get married so she can escape and split the fortune, but Lady Hideko, terrified what had happened to her would happen to her, shows reluctance to accept the deal. Then she tells him of the torture room her uncle has in the basement, but the Count shows her a vial of concentrated opium and tells her if they ever do get caught, at least he won't be able to take her alive. Lady Hideko then tells the Count to find her a new maid, one they can use to send to the mental hospital in her stead. The Count sends Tamako with a letter instructing Lady Hideko to manipulate Tamako using her material greed. Throughout the time Tamako spent in the house, the Count and the lady use every chance they get to manipulate and make a puppet out of Tamako. As time goes on, the lady forms a deep bond with Tamako and falls in love with her, but is disappointed and tries to kill herself, but is stopped by Tamako, who saves her and confesses to everything. The lady also tells her of the Count's proposal and the two decide to work together. Before they leave for Japan, Tamako tells her family about the change in plans and then destroys the perverse books. In the present, after putting Tamako in the mental hospital, the Count and lady go out for lunch. The Count tells Lady Hideko they'll soon hear of Tamako's death from the hospital. In the hospital, a fire breaks out with the aid of Tamako's family. Tamako escapes. Later that night, Lady Hideko visits the next room in a motel they are staying at with opium poison wine at hand. Count Fujiwara passes out and Lady Hideko and Tamako reunite and escape with the money, disguising Lady Hideko as a man. Lady Hideko sends a letter informing her uncle Kazuki of the whereabouts of the Count and tells him everything. The Count is tortured in the basement. Kazuki asks for details of the wedding night to satisfy his perverse fantasies. As he's being tortured, the Count begs for cigarettes and gives the old man details to fuel his lust. Moments later, Kazuki notices the blue smoke that had filled the room, and the Count reveals that his cigarettes were laced with mercury. The gas kills both men.